Good morning, folks, and welcome to a very brand new episode of Finmet Mondays. This week has probably been the most happening and exciting week that's gone by, Sunil. I'm sure you'll agree with me. We've seen major losses in gold and silver, some critical supports being broken, and a whole flurry of questions as to what do I do now? Where does gold and silver go from here? And I think it'll be really fun to unpack over the next few minutes. But let me start off by asking you, what was your takeaways, your key takeaways from last week's developments?
For me, last week, three things stand out. One is the inflation data that came out on Thursday looked weaker than expected. The Fed wants to see the core inflation coming down, and the signals are that they are succeeding in that. And so the interest rate hikes that they've done have made an impact. I think it also means that maybe they'll not jump into another rate hike and just watch the impact for now. The second thing that stood out for me was silver. Like I mentioned last week, silver has come off a bit, but it's quite resilient compared to what happened on gold. So that's been interesting. And then what happened on gold was a complete washout. I think, there's a word that people in the markets use called capitulation. Basically, it means surrender. So I think there was a lot of people who had long positions and then on Friday just surrendered. And that's why we closed on the very lows. So, as you said, we're in a precarious situation right now for anybody who's long gold. And so maybe you can look into the future and show us what the charts show for both gold and silver. Maybe you enlighten us about what you think is going to happen in the coming weeks.
I think we should first begin by just unpacking some of the inflation data points that came in. The interesting element was, like you mentioned, US core PC price index um, dropping. Like you see the bar charts here for the month of August, they have dropped. This is a very positive sign. But what led prices to still drop, even though inflation reading cooled, was the PC price index year over year number. You see that the consensus forecast was set to come in at 3.5%, and it came and met that number, and it was 0.1% higher than the previous reading that we had in the month of July. This was the August reading, this is the July reading. So it still tells you that there are sticky inflation pressures. Like if you even look at this particular chart, it tells you that the last bar is slightly above the July number. And that's the kind of signal that the markets felt that no, inflation is still here to stay. And as a consequence of that, we're going to see the Fed continue to remain very tight on monetary policy. Coming to gold first, let's tackle gold. The very key takeaway that I took from gold's price chart was something that you're also familiar with, which is known as the death cross. The 50 exponential moving average, which is the moving average, but weighted towards more recent events, is the red line here. And the black line here is the 200-day moving average, which is kind of a summary of our past 6 months, more than 6 months worth of data. And whenever the red line moves below the black line, we say that that's a death cross, which means there's a long-term bearish trend that's about to come. And this is very disheartening to say, but it's very likely that this might set off a huge bear run in gold coming forward. That being said, we have to take into cognizance the fact that on the RSI, we are currently oversold. So that might be a short-term buying signal as well for the metal to cross back again. We also are seeing a support here at 1851. This is where prices paused on Friday as well. So here also is where we might see a pullback. On silver, like you said, silver has been extremely resilient. There are exactly two areas here where you see a double bottom support. This region over here, which is the 22.112 region. This is the 22.112 support. This support over here has been shielding silver ever since the start of the year. And now you're again coming back to a test of this 22.112 support. At the same time, you also have an ascending trend line right over here, which is shielding, again, providing another layer of protection to the silver's downslide. Now, my view for the next week is definitely that we are going to see a possible uptick in price action briefly. This is because these are very inviting levels. These are very, these are levels that buyers would be interested to enter the markets, given that we've not hit these levels before. But at the same time, we have to take into account that we also have the non-farm payrolls and the unemployment rate numbers coming in October. This is again a very key data point, the signal of the labor market, how the labor market in the US is performing. So there might be a slight pullback up until Thursday, is what I believe. I don't think we're going to see a continuous downslide, both in gold and silver. The supports that you mentioned, that you see are 22.11 in silver and 1850 in gold, will be kind of acting as a shield in the interim. But come Friday, when the unemployment rate and the non farm payrolls come in, that might be a deciding factor for further extended bearish action, or could be a potential for a pullback in the metal. So it's still very difficult to say. Just like how last week we weren't able to predict that gold is going to see such a huge downslide, it just came all of a sudden. It could be very well this week that might happen. From a strategy standpoint, I would say if you are someone who's long on gold and silver, this would be very a good opportunity to buy on dips, because at these levels there's a strong supports. These are going to be areas where bears are going to find very difficult to break, even though there's a lot of fundamental bearishness going on.
I think I agree. I mean, I've seen now talk already about physical demand. There are talk about large amounts of shipments ready to move from Europe to Asia because at these levels demand is picking up. Also for silver, shipments of silver are going from London to India now because demand is picking up. So there is fundamental support also from physical markets. And so there should be a good amount of support. But tell me where you think the next resistance will be. Suppose we on Monday and Tuesday we see an uptick. Where do you think the next resistance is going to be?
So the first resistance is going to be at this 1884 level. This was a support previously, but has now turned into a resistance. And we have a psychological 1900 resistance that has always acted as a point. So these are the two levels I would pose as resistance.
If you think, if let's say for some reason, let's say the bears come in big time and start shorting gold on Monday or Tuesday, and we break this current support level, where do you think the next support is? $1,800, is it?
On gold, it'll be 1802. Correct. I would call this as a major support, because we classify as major and minor. Minor is where there is a higher chance of it getting broken. Major is where a lot of bearish action is required to really break it. Yeah.
Thanks for the insight. I think it'll be an exciting few days, and we'll get some sense of where we are.
Thank you so much for joining in, and see you next Monday.